On for you right now. She is ready to take...
Under the glow of 1,000 Christmas lights, one voice rises, pure, powerful, timeless. Every December, it returns, echoing through malls, radios, and memories alike. All I want for Christmas is you. But behind that perfect note lies a story born from chaos, of a little girl who never truly belonged and a woman who refused to be silenced. Before she became a global icon, Mariah Carey was just a mixed-race child from Long Island, caught between two worlds that both pushed her away. She grew up dreaming of freedom, of a stage where her voice could drown out pain, judgment, and fear. Yet fame would bring its own kind of prison. Controlling executives, relentless tabloids, a world that demanded perfection, but punished emotion. This is not just the story of a singer. It's the story of survival, of reinvention, of a woman who turned her heartbreak into harmony, and her pain into power. So how did Mariah Carey rise from isolation to immortality? And what did it cost her to become the voice that could shatter glass and the boundaries of her world? Mariah Angela Carey was born on March 27, 1969, in Huntington, Long Island, a place that looked peaceful on the outside, but for her was filled with invisible walls. Her mother, Patricia Hickey, was an Irish-American opera singer with a voice as grand as the stage she dreamed of. Her father, Alfred Carey, was an aeronautical engineer, and a black man living in a time when love across color lines was still considered rebellion. Their marriage didn't survive the world's cruelty. When Mariah was just 3, her parents divorced. What followed wasn't just separation, it was survival. She watched as neighbors hurled slurs, as their family home was vandalized, as her father quietly carried wounds no one saw. Mariah lived mostly with her mother, moving from one small apartment to another. They often struggled to pay bills, sometimes living without heat in the freezing New York winters. But through it all, there was one constant: music. Her mother practiced arias in the living room, and Mariah, just a little girl, tried to mimic every note. She was born with perfect pitch, Patricia would say, but even perfect pitch couldn't fix a broken home. At school, Mariah never fit in. Too white for some, too black for others. She became invisible. And so she turned inward. She sang to herself, to the walls, to the silence. Her voice became her shield, her secret world. Every night she'd lie awake, dreaming not of fame, but of escape. Of a place where her voice could finally be heard without judgment. A place where she could belong, not as too much or not enough, but simply as Mariah. By her late teens, Mariah Carey was chasing dreams faster than she could afford to eat. She moved to New York City with little more than a notebook of lyrics, a demo tape, and a conviction that music was her only way out. She worked as a waitress, a coat-check girl, a backup singer. Any job that would buy her another day to chase a miracle. At night, she recorded in tiny studios, layering harmonies over borrowed beats. She sang background vocals for Brenda K. Starr, a Latin pop singer who saw something raw and radiant in her voice, like lightning trapped in glass. Then came the night that would change everything. At an industry party, Brenda handed Mariah's demo cassette to Tommy Mottola, the powerful head of Sony Music. He listened to it in his limousine on the way home, and legend says he turned the car around. He had found the voice. Mariah was only 19 when Sony signed her, but the ink on her contract was written in both promise and danger. She had her big break, but she was stepping into a world ruled by men who wanted not just her sound, but her soul. Still, in the studio, she was unstoppable. Her voice soared through 5 octaves, like it had been waiting for this moment since childhood. Every note was rebellion, a declaration that she was no longer invisible. And as the first notes of Vision of Love played, the world finally heard her truth. It wasn't just a debut, it was deliverance. The moment a girl from Long Island became the next great voice of a generation. In 1990, the world met a new voice, one that could glide from whisper to whistle, shattering ceilings and expectations alike. Mariah Carey's debut album stormed the charts with an intensity no one saw coming. Vision of Love, Love Takes Time, Someday, and I Don't Want to Cry, 4 number-1 hits from a single album. A miracle in motion. Critics hailed her as the songbird supreme. Fans called her an angel, but inside, Mariah still felt like that little girl fighting to be heard. Behind the fairy tale stood Tommy Mottola, the powerful Sony executive who had discovered her, and soon married her. To the world, it looked like a Hollywood love story. Behind closed doors, it felt more like captivity. Their mansion in upstate New York had cameras, guards, locked gates. Mariah once said it felt like singing from a gilded cage. Still, her music soared. Emotions showcased her range. Music Box became a global phenomenon with Hero and Without You. Songs that made millions cry, even as she was silently crying herself. By 1995, Daydream proved she wasn't just a star, she was an empire. Fantasy became the first song by a female artist to debut at #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. And One Sweet Day, her duet with Boys II Men Menway, would hold that position for a record-breaking 16 weeks. She had conquered the world, but in conquering it, she was losing herself. Every smile for the camera, every perfect performance, hid a woman desperate for air. Mariah Carey had become a living legend, and a prisoner of her own perfection. Still, she sang on, not for applause, but for survival. Because deep down, she knew the storm was coming, and when it hit, it would test not her voice, but her soul. By the early 2000s, Mariah Carey was untouchable, or so it seemed. She had sold millions of records, won Grammys, and built an empire of sequins, smiles, and perfect high notes. But behind the glamour, her life was beginning to unravel. After years of control, Mariah broke free from Tommy Mottola. But freedom came at a cost. She wanted her art back, her image, her sound. She signed a record-breaking deal with Virgin Records worth $100 million and began working on a film and album called Glitter. It was meant to mark her rebirth. Instead, it became her breaking point. In July 2001, Mariah appeared on MTV's TRL, rambling, exhausted, handing out popsicles to the audience. The world didn't see a woman in pain. It saw a punchline. Days later, she was hospitalized for extreme exhaustion. Headlines screamed, "Mariah's Meltdown." When Glitter released on September 11, 2001, the same-day tragedy struck America. It was doomed. Critics called it a disaster. Sales collapsed. For the first time, the golden voice of the 90s had fallen silent. The same media that once crowned her queen now tore her apart. Every flaw was amplified, every rumor exaggerated. Mariah Carey, once the embodiment of control, was now labeled crazy. But what the world mistook for madness was really a woman breaking under years of pressure, trying to find herself amid the noise. In her own words, "If I didn't have my voice, I'd lose who I am." And for a moment, she nearly did. After the storm of Glitter, Mariah Carey disappeared from the spotlight. To many, it looked like the end. Another fallen star swallowed by fame. But for Mariah, it was the beginning of something deeper, a reckoning. She took time away, rebuilt her spirit, surrounded herself with people who saw her not as a product, but as a person. When she returned to the studio, she wasn't chasing hits. She was chasing healing. And in 2005, she released The Emancipation of Mimi, a title that said everything. Mimi was the real her, the woman behind the diva mask, ready to reclaim her story. The album exploded. We Belong Together dominated the charts. It's Like That reminded the world she still knew how to move a crowd, and her voice, that 5-octave miracle, sounded freer than ever. Critics hailed it as one of the greatest comebacks in pop history. Mariah wasn't just back, she was reborn. She had turned public humiliation into triumph, pain into platinum. Awards poured in, but this time she didn't measure success in trophies. It was in peace. The ability to stand on stage as herself, no longer hiding behind anyone else's idea of perfection. And when she sang, "I've got me, baby," it wasn't just a lyric. It was a declaration. The world had tried to define her through scandal and struggle, but Mariah Carey had rewritten her own script. Her story was no longer about survival. It was about sovereignty. She had freed her voice, her heart, and her name. The girl who once sang to escape was now singing to live. By the mid-2000s, Mariah Carey had done what few ever could. She turned her fall into a foundation. Her comeback wasn't just a return to the charts. It was a reclamation of identity. With 19 Billboard #1 singles, Mariah stands second only to the Beatles, a record that still awes the music industry. Her range, her control, her songwriting, all redefined what it meant to be a pop and R&B artist. She didn't just sing high notes, she made emotion sound infinite. Artists across generations, Beyoncé, Ariana Grande, Jennifer Hudson, Christina Aguilera, all credit Mariah as a blueprint. The riffs, the melisma, the whistle tones that became today's vocal standard, they started with her. She taught the world that technical perfection could coexist with raw vulnerability. And then, there's the song that never dies, All I Want for Christmas Is You. What began as a joyful holiday tune became a cultural ritual, a symbol of warmth, nostalgia, and the enduring power of music. Each winter, as lights twinkle and snow falls, her voice returns, not as a memory, but as a tradition. Yet Mariah's true legacy isn't just in charts or royalties. It's in the courage she gave others to be unapologetically themselves, to embrace flaws, to find beauty in survival, to sing through pain, and sound glorious doing it. Mariah Carey didn't just change music. She changed how we listen to women who dare to rise again. In the years that followed her triumphant return, Mariah Carey began writing not for charts, but for clarity. Fame had given her everything, and taken just as much. Now she was ready to tell her story her way. In 2020, she released her memoir, The Meaning of Mariah Carey, a book that peeled back every layer the tabloids had painted over. It was raw, poetic, and deeply human. She spoke about racism, family trauma, control, and resilience, but also about forgiveness. For the first time, the world saw Mariah not as a diva, but as a survivor. She found balance in motherhood, raising her twins, Moroccan and Monroe, the lights of her universe. In their laughter, she found the kind of love that no chart position could rival. Motherhood taught her patience, humility, and joy beyond applause. In interviews, Mariah often smiles when called a diva. She reclaims the word, turning it from insult to empowerment. To me, she says, diva just means someone who knows who she is. Today, she stands as both legend and woman, no longer defined by headlines or heartbreak, but by her endurance and grace. She knows her worth, her power, her voice, and she's still learning, still growing, still singing, because for Mariah Carey, survival was never the end of the story. It was just the bridge to freedom, to faith, and to the sound of her own truth. The snow falls softly. Somewhere, in every corner of the world, a familiar melody begins to play. Her voice, bright, boundless, eternal, fills the air. It's easy to hear All I Want for Christmas Is You, and forget the pain that came before the joy. But behind every note is a lifetime, a child who felt unseen, a woman who lost herself to fame, and a legend who found her way back through song. Mariah Carey's story is not one of perfection. It's a story of persistence, of refusing to stay silent when the world tried to define her. She turned rejection into rhythm, heartbreak into harmony, and survival into art. Through every octave, every lyric, she taught us that resilience can sound like music, that the most fragile voices are often the strongest. And as the lights shimmer and the last chorus fades, we remember, greatness isn't about being flawless. It's about standing back up and singing anyway. This is Mariah Carey, the girl who dreamed of being heard, the woman who became a symbol of strength, and the voice that will echo through every December and beyond.